In a quiet medieval village, long before modern medicine ever existed, people lived side by side with danger. Sickness could arrive without warning. A bad winter could empty the grain stores. And a small wound could turn into a deadly infection. Yet, somehow, many villagers survived. Some even lived long, healthy lives that surprised the royal doctors of the time. Historians today wondered how this was possible. There were no hospitals, no vitamins, and no clean drinking systems. Still, old records show strong farmers, sharp-minded elders, and workers who kept going from sunrise to sunset. What kept them thriving? One day, a young scribe discovered a strange bundle of old papers hidden inside a church wall. The pages carried faded drawings, strange symbols, and notes from a forgotten healer. The scribe realized he was holding something rare, a list of superfoods medieval people used to stay healthy, foods that had slowly disappeared from memory. But the notes also carried warnings. Some foods were powerful. Some were dangerous if used wrongly. And some were guarded secrets known only to a few families. As the scribe read the list, he felt a chill. Why were these foods hidden? Why did the healer beg that the knowledge be protected? And what happened to the people who once used them? To understand the truth, he decided to travel across the kingdom, searching for clues. Each village held a different piece of the puzzle. Each food had a story. And each story revealed something about how medieval people fought sickness, hunger, and death itself, quietly, cleverly, and with skills the modern world forgot. The young scribe stepped out of the old stone church just as the morning bell echoed across the quiet courtyard. His cloak fluttered slightly in the cool breeze, and he pressed it closer to his body to protect the fragile papers hidden inside. These papers were old, far older than anything he had ever held before. Their yellowed edges cracked softly whenever he moved, and the faded ink showed strange symbols and drawings that awakened both curiosity and caution in him. He had found them tucked inside a hollow wall behind the altar, wrapped tightly in cloth as if someone long ago had wanted to hide them well. He looked down at the papers again, feeling a sense of weight, not just from the parchment, but from the mystery they carried. Who wrote them? Why hide them? And what knowledge had been guarded so carefully? He stepped out onto the village road. The ground was wet from last night's rain, and each step left a soft print in the mud. The scribe was not a strong man, nor a wealthy one, but he had a gift for reading and understanding old writing, gifts rare in these times. It was that skill that made the discovery of the papers feel almost like destiny. Their words described forgotten foods, hidden remedies, and strange notes about how people kept themselves strong through harsh winters and sickness. He wanted to understand every secret the healer had left behind. He began his journey down the long path that led away from the church. The first rays of morning light touched the fields around him, painting them gold. Birds flew from tree to tree, singing their small, bright songs. The village behind him slowly came alive, doors opening, people stepping outside to begin their work, but the scribe paid little attention. His thoughts were fixed on the list written on the old parchment. Barley. Garlic. Cabbage. Herbs for fever. Broths for weakness. Simple things. Common things. Yet the healer had written them with great care, as though they were treasures. Why? He needed to know. His boots sank deeper into the mud as he walked farther from the village. The sky began to cloud over, giving the day a gray tone. He passed a wooden fence where a few sheep grazed and a small house where smoke curled from the chimney. A farmer carrying a basket nodded politely as he walked by but did not stop to speak. The scribe wanted to ask the man about old remedies, but something held him back. He felt it was better to wait until he reached a larger village, one where more memories might linger. As the hours passed, he noticed a strange pattern. In the small clusters of homes he passed along the way, people seemed uneasy when he asked simple questions about old foods or forgotten healing methods. When he asked a woman drawing water from a well whether she knew any foods her grandmother had used during sickness, she glanced around nervously and said, "We do not talk about such things." A group of farmers repairing a fence said something similar. One of them even whispered, "Some knowledge brings trouble. Best to leave it where it sleeps." The scribe felt a shiver, though the air was not cold. Why would harmless foods cause fear? There was no danger in vegetables or herbs. Yet every person spoke in the same quiet, warning tone, as if they feared waking some old shadow. He kept walking. By midday, he reached a lively market village. Stalls lined the muddy street, filled with grain, dried herbs, wool, and simple crafts. Women bargained loudly over baskets of vegetables. Children ran between carts, chasing chickens and laughing. It felt safer here, more open, so the scribe approached an herb seller, an elderly woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. He gently unfolded a corner of his parchment and showed her the drawing of barley. The woman froze. The color drained slightly from her face, and she lowered her voice. "Where did you get that?" "In the church," the scribe answered softly. "Hidden inside a wall." She looked around quickly, making sure no one saw the parchment. "You should not show this in public," she whispered. "People talk. People fear what they do not understand." "But why fear a list of simple foods?" he asked. "They helped people, did they not?" The woman's fingers trembled slightly as she touched her herbs. "My grandmother once spoke of healers who used such foods. But in times of sickness, when people died faster than they could be buried, fear ran wild. Villagers blamed healers for not stopping death. They said healers hid cures or caused illness with their strange knowledge. Many burned their notes. Some disappeared." The scribe's heart sank. So the knowledge was hidden because of fear. She nodded. Fear spread faster than illness. And fear destroys more than fire. She refused to say more. She waved him away, worried someone might overhear. The scribe left the market feeling unsettled. He walked toward the forest path that would lead him to the next settlement. The sky had grown darker, and the wind began to pick up. By the time he entered the forest, a storm was forming overhead. Rain began to fall in large, heavy drops. The trees groaned under the growing wind. The road became slippery and uneven, and the scribe struggled to keep his cloak tight around the precious papers. The storm worsened. Thunder cracked, and lightning lit the forest in sudden flashes. Cold, soaked, and shivering, the scribe pressed on until he saw a dim orange light between the trees, a lantern glowing inside a small wooden hut. He knocked on the door. An old man opened it, his beard long and white, his eyes gentle. "You look half frozen," the man said. "Come inside before the storm eats you whole." The scribe stepped inside, grateful for the warmth of the fire burning in the stone hearth. The room smelled of herbs, wood, and something cooking in a pot. He sat near the fire, letting the heat thaw his shaking hands. But as he unwrapped his cloak, the old papers slipped out and fell onto the wooden floor. The old man stared at them for a long moment. "I know those marks," he said softly. "My father called them the healer's marks." The scribe looked up. "You know what they mean?" The old man sat down across from him, his face troubled. "My father lived in a time when healers walked from village to village, sharing their knowledge. People trusted them, until a sickness swept the land that no one could stop. When death grew too heavy, people wanted someone to blame. So they blamed the healers." "Blamed them?" the scribe repeated. "They said healers kept cures hidden," the man said. "They said the healers' strange foods and herbs brought sickness instead of healing. Many healers destroyed their own notes to protect themselves. Others buried their knowledge. Some vanished in the night." The scribe felt the weight of the old parchment grow heavier in his hands. The knowledge he carried had once been dangerous, not because it harmed, but because frightened people believed it did. The old man leaned closer. The list you carry is powerful. But not everyone will want you to share it. Knowledge brings strength to the poor, and fear to those who prefer them weak. The room fell silent except for the snapping fire and the rain pounding on the roof. I want to learn why these foods mattered, the scribe finally said. Why they helped people. Why they should not be forgotten. The old man studied him quietly. You are brave, he said. Perhaps brave enough to finish what the healers could not. He opened a small wooden box and handed the scribe a few dried roots and scraps of old parchment. These survived my father's time. They may help you understand more. But use them wisely. The scribe nodded gratefully and spent the night listening to the storm fade outside. By morning, the sky had cleared. Sunlight dripped through the leaves in thin golden lines. The scribe stepped outside, holding the bundle of papers tighter than ever. Now he knew more about the danger, but also more about the importance of the journey ahead. He walked down the road again, the wet earth shining beneath his boots, knowing that each village ahead carried a piece of the forgotten truth. And he was determined to find every piece. The scribe reached the wide valley just after noon. The quiet farming village lay ahead of him, surrounded by long fields that moved gently in the wind. The smell of soil and young grain filled the air. Farmers carrying baskets walked past him, their boots covered in dust, their hands rough from work. Most nodded politely but kept moving, too busy with the day's tasks to spare time for a stranger. He had come here for one purpose. Someone in this village had once worked in the king's granary long ago. Someone who knew the truth about barley, the first of the forgotten foods listed in the healer's old papers. After asking a few villagers for directions, the scribe found the elderly man sitting outside a small wooden house at the edge of the fields. The man's back was bent from years of labor, but his eyes were clear and thoughtful. A pile of grain sacks rested beside him, and he held a handful of barley seeds, letting them slip through his fingers like dry rain. The scribe bowed respectfully. May I sit here for a moment, sir? You may, the old man said with a gentle smile. Strangers do not often wander here unless they are lost or hungry. I came looking for someone who worked in the king's granary, the scribe replied, taking a seat on a wooden stool nearby. Then you have found him, the man said, laughing softly. Though that was many years ago. The scribe opened his cloak and pulled out the parchment with the barley symbol. The old man's smile faded as he leaned closer. You carry the healer's marks, he whispered. I never thought I would see one again. So it is true, the scribe said. You know what this symbol means? The elderly man looked at the parchment for a long moment before speaking again. It means barley. The grain that once fed half the kingdom, though few remember that now. He took a deep breath and looked out toward the fields. Barley is humble. Simple. Not soft and white like wheat. Not special like the grains nobles served at their feasts. But barley grew when nothing else survived. Storms, cold winds, dry summers, barley stayed standing. Even in the worst years. He scooped more seeds from a small pouch and dropped them into the scribe's hand. They were hard, dull-colored, and very plain. These tiny seeds saved more lives than any royal doctor, the old man said. Workers ate barley bread before long days in the fields. Soldiers carried barley cakes on long marches. And when winters were harsh, barley porridge kept whole villages alive. The scribe listened closely. The healer's papers had hinted that barley was a quiet superfood, and now he understood why. It was not powerful in a magical way. It was powerful because it never failed the people. How did you use it in the king's granary? The scribe asked. The old man smiled at the memory. My job was to check every sack that came through the castle gate. The king's workers needed bread every morning, and the soldiers needed it even more. Barley stayed good for a long time. It did not rot quickly like wheat. It did not attract insects the way other grains did. It was dependable. He paused, his expression turning more serious. During famines, the granary master used barley to ration food. We made thin breads and boiled soups that stretched for days. Whole armies marched with only barley cakes in their packs. Slow-burning strength, they used to call it. A food that keeps you going even when your body wants to stop. The scribe imagined tired soldiers crossing long, empty lands with nothing but barley to sustain them. No wonder the healer had valued this grain so highly. But if it was so useful, the scribe asked, why did people forget it? The old man let out a soft sigh. Because barley was a poor man's grain. It grew everywhere, even in bad soil. Anyone could plant it. Anyone could eat it. And because of that, the nobles hated it. Hated it, the scribe repeated, surprised. They thought barley was too common, too plain to be served at their tables, the man explained. They wanted wheat bread, soft, white, expensive. Wheat made them feel important. So barley slowly disappeared from noble kitchens. And when the nobles stop eating something, the rest of the kingdom stops valuing it too. The scribe thought about how strange and unfair that was. A grain that saved thousands of lives had been pushed aside simply because it did not look rich. And over time, the old man continued, people forgot its strength. They forgot that it once protected them from hunger. That it kept workers steady through long labor. That it kept soldiers marching across mountains. He chuckled bitterly. People like to forget simple things. Simple things do not feel special. The scribe wrote down every word. The healer's papers now felt heavier than before, not because of weight, but because of meaning. Barley was not just a food. It was a symbol of survival, of the quiet, powerful strength of ordinary people. The old man reached for a small bowl beside him and handed it to the scribe. Inside were roasted barley grains, warm and nutty. Try some, he said. They kept me alive more times than I can count. The scribe tasted them. The flavor was mild, but satisfying. He could imagine eating this on a long journey or during a winter evening. The man continued, my father told me stories from his father's time. When sickness spread through the villages, barley broth was one of the few things people could keep down. It was gentle on the stomach, and it warmed the body. Mothers fed it to their children when fever came. Old men drank it when their bones ached. Some even believed barley brought calm to the mind. The scribe nodded slowly. It seems barley was more than food. It was medicine too. In a way, yes, the man said. Not magic. Not a cure for all illness. But it helped. It gave people the strength to fight when their bodies were weak. And sometimes, strength is the only medicine you have. A breeze passed through the valley, carrying the smell of fresh grain. The old man looked out at the fields again, his face thoughtful. It saddens me, he said softly. People today look for special cures, rare herbs, secret recipes. But sometimes the strongest help comes from the simplest things. Barley was one of them. The scribe thanked him, bowing deeply. You have given me more than information. You have given me understanding. Then carry it well, the old man said. Knowledge like this is easily lost, but hard to rediscover. The scribe tucked the parchment back into his cloak and stood. As he walked away, he looked back once more. The old man was still sitting there, letting barley seeds fall through his fingers like old memories slipping through time. The scribe felt certain now, his journey mattered. The forgotten foods were not just part of history, they were part of the strength that once held entire kingdoms together. And barley, humble and plain, had been one of the greatest gifts the land had ever given to its people. He continued down the road, ready for whatever the next village would reveal. The scribe left the valley of barley fields behind him and walked for several hours along a narrow dirt path that curved between low hills. The morning sun warmed his back, and for a while, the journey felt peaceful. But the peace did not last long. As he approached the next village, he noticed something different about the air. It carried a sharp, earthy smell, stronger than anything he had sensed before. It almost stung his nose. He did not understand it at first, but soon the answer became clear. Garlic. The smell of garlic filled the entire village. Small bundles of garlic hung from nearly every doorway. Some were fresh and white, others were dried and brown. Children carried strings of garlic like ribbons, and old women smashed cloves on wooden boards with the flat side of knives. The scribe had seen garlic in his travels, but never in such large amounts. Curious, he approached a woman who was arranging garlic bulbs on a table outside her home. She was middle-aged, with a kind face and steady eyes. When she looked at the scribe, her expression sharpened, as if she sensed immediately that he was not simply a traveler asking for directions. "You seek something," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "What is it?" The scribe hesitated for a moment. After his experiences in the previous villages, he had learned to speak carefully. He reached into his cloak and pulled out one of the old papers, showing a small sketch of garlic drawn by the healer. The woman's eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "From a church wall," the scribe answered softly. "Someone hid these papers long ago. I'm trying to understand their meaning." The woman looked around to make sure no one was listening. Then she motioned for him to follow her inside. Her home was small, filled with hanging herbs and bundles of dried plants. A clay pot boiled over a low fire, releasing a strong scent of garlic and honey. She closed the door behind him and lowered her voice. "My mother was a healer," she said. She kept notes of everything she learned. Most women like her destroyed their writings when fear spread through the land. But my mother hid some of them. She pulled out a wooden box from beneath the table. Inside were thin scraps of paper, rough and brown from age. She spread them out carefully and pointed to a drawing of garlic bulbs. "This," she said, "was our shield." The scribe leaned closer. "What do you mean?" "In the old days, people believed sickness traveled through bad air," she explained. They burned garlic in their homes to clean the air. They hung garlic near windows and doors to keep illness away. Some even believed it chased off evil spirits. She smiled sadly. They did not know the science, of course. They only knew that garlic helped. When fever came, those who ate garlic often recovered faster. When wounds became infected, garlic could stop the rot. It stayed a mystery to them, but it worked. She picked up a clove of garlic, sliced it open, and held it out so the scribe could see the fresh juice inside. "Villagers mixed garlic with honey to make medicine," she said. "For coughs, for throat pain, for chest sickness." The mixture was warm and sharp, strong enough to fight the illness inside the body. She dipped her finger into the pot bubbling on the fire. "This is garlic honey," she said. "My mother made it for soldiers during harsh winters. They rubbed it onto wounds before battle to stop infection from creeping in. Some soldiers carried cloves in their pockets, believing the smell alone protected them." The scribe took notes quickly, amazed. Garlic was so simple, so common, and yet it held power greater than many expensive cures. But something in the woman's voice told him there was more, something darker. "Then why," he asked, "did people stop using this knowledge?" The woman sighed deeply and closed the box of notes. "Because fear is stronger than garlic," she said quietly. "Stronger than truth." When horrible sickness spread and people died in great numbers, no one understood why. They blamed healers. They blamed herbs. They blamed anything they could not explain. She touched the garlic hanging above the doorway with a trembling hand. "Some claimed healers used garlic for magic," she continued. "They said women like my mother spoke with dark forces. They accused them of calling sickness instead of chasing it away. Many were punished. Many disappeared. The scribe felt a familiar heaviness in his chest, the same feeling he had when the old man spoke of the barley healers hiding their notes. "My mother hid her knowledge to survive," the woman said. "She taught me everything quietly, in whispers. She told me to never share it freely, for people do not always want the truth. They want someone to blame." She sat down beside the fire, stirring the pot again. "But people here in this village," she said, "never fully forgot. We still use garlic for healing, even if we cannot say it openly. You must be careful as you travel. Some people fear old knowledge. Some fear what they do not understand." The scribe looked at the garlic bundles hanging from the ceiling and imagined generations of villagers using this humble bulb as their first line of defense. Garlic did not promise miracles. It did not cure every sickness. But it helped the body fight, it strengthened the weak and protected the vulnerable. He folded his parchment carefully. "I want to bring this knowledge back," he said quietly. "Not to cause fear. Not to challenge anyone. But to help people understand what the past has to offer." The woman nodded, though her expression carried both hope and worry. He folded his parchment carefully. "I want to bring this knowledge back," he said quietly. "Not to cause fear. Not to challenge anyone. But to help people understand what the past has to offer." The woman nodded, though her expression carried both hope and worry. "Then learn as much as you can," she said. "Learn how garlic saved the sick. Learn how honey kept wounds clean. Learn how soldiers trusted simple things more than charms or prayers. But never forget the risk. Those who carried knowledge often paid a price." She handed him a small pouch filled with dried garlic and a small jar of garlic honey wrapped in cloth. "Take these," she said. "They may help you. And they will remind you of my mother, who believed knowledge should live even when people try to bury it." The scribe accepted the gift with gratitude. When he stepped outside again, the sharp scent of garlic filled the air once more. Children laughed nearby, swinging strings of garlic like toys. Women hung new bundles to dry in the sun. It was a village that lived between fear and tradition, between memory and survival. As he walked away from the woman's home, he felt the weight of the healer's past and the importance of the journey ahead. Garlic was not just a food. It was a shield, one sharpened by time, belief, and hard-earned experience. It had protected countless lives, yet nearly been erased from history by fear alone. He tightened his cloak around him and stepped back onto the road. His journey was far from over, and the next village would hold new secrets waiting to be rediscovered. But with each step, he felt more determined to bring the forgotten truths back to the world, one story, one food, one memory at a time. The scribe traveled north for several days, moving through colder land with each step. The wind here carried a sharp bite, and the sky was often covered in thick gray clouds. When he finally reached the northern town he had been told about, the first thing he noticed was the smell, fresh, earthy, and slightly sweet. The second thing he saw was the endless stretch of cabbage fields spread across the horizon like green waves. The people of this town were used to the cold. Their clothes were thick, and their steps were slow but steady. Smoke rose from chimneys, and carts filled with cabbage heads rolled through the streets. It was clear that cabbage was not just food here, it was life. The scribe stopped near a field where an old woman was harvesting cabbages, her hands red from the cold. She looked up at him with a smile. "Looking for something, traveler?" she asked. "I'm searching for old knowledge," he said. "Knowledge about how people once used simple foods to survive." The woman laughed softly and tapped the cabbage beside her. "Then you have come to the right place. This humble thing saved more lives than kings ever did." She invited him to follow her into her home, a small wooden cottage warmed by a crackling fire. Inside, cabbages hung from the ceiling beams, and several more sat in baskets. A pot of cabbage soup simmered on the stove, filling the room with comforting warmth. The scribe sat near the fire as she stirred the pot. Cabbage grows when other plants refuse to, she said. Snow can fall early, storms can ruin fields, but cabbage will still stand tall. Even when frost bites it, the inside stays strong and sweet. She handed him a bowl of the soup. Try this. It kept families alive in winters so cold, even the rivers froze solid. The scribe tasted it. The flavor was simple but warm, filling his chest with heat. He understood instantly how such a small thing could mean survival. Long ago, the woman continued, our winters were cruel. Food was scarce. Animals grew thin, and grain spoiled in damp cellars. But cabbage stayed good for many months. Mothers stored it in barrels, hung it from rafters, or buried it under snow. And when hunger came, they boiled it into soup. Her eyes softened as she remembered. My grandmother used to say that cabbage carries the strength of the earth itself. It grows near the ground, holding on tight, never giving up. That strength passed to the people who ate it. The scribe wrote the words down carefully. He could feel the truth in them. Cabbage did not look powerful. It did not smell special. But in its quiet way, it was a healer. The woman sat beside him and folded her hands. There were winters, she said, when cabbage was the only food left. Entire villages survived because of it. Children grew thin, but they survived. Old men trembled with cold, but they lived. Without cabbage, many would never have seen spring. She leaned closer, her voice lowering. During one famine, the snow stayed until mid-spring. People lost hope. But one farmer had a storehouse full of cabbage. He opened it to everyone. Each family took a little each day. They made soup, they boiled the leaves, they ate them raw. Weeks passed. The famine ended. And not a single person in that village died. The scribe felt a wave of admiration for this simple vegetable that had done so much. He wondered why no one spoke of cabbage with respect anymore. As if reading his thoughts, the woman sighed. People today forget what saved their ancestors. They chase expensive foods, rich spices, rare ingredients. They look down on cabbage because it is common. Because it grows easily. Because it comes from the soil and not from gold. She shook her head sadly. But common things hold great power. Cabbage cleans the body. It gives warmth. It keeps the stomach full when times are hard. It heals quietly, without asking for praise. The scribe looked at the cabbages hanging from the beams and realized how symbolic they were. They didn't shout for attention. They didn't look noble or important. Yet they had carried whole communities through hunger and cold. The woman added another log to the fire and continued. My mother used cabbage for everything. Soup for hunger. Warm leaves pressed on swollen joints. Raw leaves for fever. A broth made from its core to help newborn babies. It was not magic. It was wisdom. The scribe wrote until his hand grew tired. Every word felt like rediscovered truth. Before he left, the woman handed him a small cloth bundle. Inside was a single cabbage, green and firm. Take this, she said. A gift from our fields. It may not look powerful, but it carries stories inside it. Stories of survival. The scribe accepted the gift with gratitude. As he stepped back into the cold air, he saw the fields once more, thousands of cabbages standing strong against the wind. He understood now why the healer had written about cabbage with such respect. This quiet vegetable had saved countless lives, yet people had forgotten its worth simply because it was ordinary. He placed the cabbage carefully into his bag and continued his journey, knowing the next village would hold another forgotten secret waiting to be uncovered. And with each step, he felt the quiet strength of cabbage guiding him forward through the cold northern wind. The scribe arrived at the castle late in the afternoon. The walls stood tall and cold, but the moment he stepped into the kitchen, everything changed. Warmth rushed over him like a blanket, and steam curled through the air in soft white clouds. The smell of herbs, onions, and boiling broth filled the room, making it feel like a safe place hidden from the hard world outside. A castle cook stood near a large pot, stirring slowly with a long wooden spoon. She was a strong woman with kind eyes and broad shoulders, the kind of person who carried both strength and softness in the same breath. When she noticed the scribe at the door, she waved him in. "You must be the one collecting old knowledge," she said. "Come closer. The fire will warm you." The scribe walked toward her, feeling the heat sink into his tired bones. The pot was huge, filled almost to the top with bubbling liquid. Bones of different sizes floated inside along with herbs, roots, and small pieces of vegetables. "What are you cooking?" he asked. "Bone broth," she replied. "The oldest medicine we ever had. And the cheapest." She smiled gently, lifting a bone with her spoon. Not everyone could afford meat in the old days. But bones? Even the poorest families could find a few. And with time and patience, those bones gave strength to the weak. The scribe took out his parchment and began writing. The healer's notes had mentioned bone broth, but only in short words. Now he wanted the full truth, the deeper meaning behind this simple food. The cook lowered the flame a little, then leaned against the table. "When people were sick," she said, "we could not give them heavy food. Their bodies were too weak. But broth, warm, thin, gentle, could slip into the body without trouble. It carried everything they needed: warmth, energy, and comfort." She handed him a small cup filled with broth. Steam rose in soft swirls. When he tasted it, the flavor was rich but soft, filled with herbs that warmed him from the inside. "Broth is simple," she continued, "but simple things often keep people alive." She walked across the kitchen and picked up a small wooden box. Inside were old notes written by cooks before her, some stained with broth, some torn at the corners. "We passed this knowledge from one cook to another," she said. "Not because it looked magical, but because it worked. No matter how poor a family was, they could boil bones and make something good." The scribe wrote quickly, fascinated by the way simple food carried so much power. The cook looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "Let me tell you a story," she said, her voice softening. "One from my childhood." She returned to the pot and stirred it slowly as she spoke. "There was a winter," she began, "far colder than anyone expected. Snow piled high. The wind was sharp like knives. Families ran out of food. Even the animals suffered. Many people fell weak." She paused, her eyes growing distant. "In that winter, there was a little boy in our village. No more than 7. His father had died the year before, and his mother grew sick when the cold came early. They had no bread, no meat, nothing." The scribe listened closely. "One day," she continued, "the boy went to the market and asked the butcher for anything he could give. The butcher had pity and handed him a bag of bones that others had thrown away. They were bare, no meat left at all." The cook tapped the pot lightly. But the boy did not give up. He went home and boiled the bones in water. He waited for hours, feeding the fire with the little wood he had. Soon the water turned cloudy, then golden. He added snow to keep the pot full, boiled it again, and gave the broth to his mother. Her voice softened. She drank a little each morning and each night. It was not strong food, but it warmed her. It kept her alive long enough for neighbors to come help when they learned of her condition. "And the boy?" the scribe asked. "He drank the broth too," she said. "Just a few sips each day. It warmed his small body and gave him strength." When spring arrived, many people had grown thin and hopeless, but the boy and his mother survived. The cook smiled faintly. That winter, bone broth saved them. Not by magic. Not by miracles. But by kindness, patience, and the strength hidden inside something most people ignored. The scribe finished writing every word. He now understood why bone broth appeared in the healer's notes. It was not only food. It was a lifeline, one available even in the hardest times. She handed him a small jar filled with cooled broth. Take this on your journey. When you grow tired, drink it. When the nights feel cold, remember this kitchen and this story. The scribe accepted the jar with deep gratitude. The warmth of the kitchen stayed with him even as he stepped outside into the gray evening air. He felt stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. This simple broth had carried families through hunger and sickness. It had saved a child and his mother. It had protected soldiers and the poor. And now, it would guide him to the next truth hidden in the healer's forgotten pages. He walked away from the castle, the jar safely inside his cloak, ready for whatever waited on the road ahead. The scribe's journey took many weeks, and by the time he turned back toward the church where it had all begun, the season had started to change. The cold northern wind softened, the fields grew greener, and he felt as if the land itself sensed the weight of the knowledge he carried. His bag was heavier now, not with gold or treasures, but with stories, memories, and the truth of foods that had once kept a whole kingdom alive. When the church finally came into view, its stone walls looked older than he remembered. Moss covered the corners, and ivy curled around the windows like fingers reaching toward the sun. The door creaked softly as he pushed it open, and the familiar cool air washed over him. Dust drifted lazily in the shafts of light coming from the roof's small cracks. He walked to the front of the church, stopped at the same wall where he had first found the hidden papers, and laid out his notes on the wooden table. The parchment looked fragile, its edges worn, yet to him it felt stronger than any weapon. Each mark, each symbol, each drawing held meaning that had almost been lost forever. He spread all the papers out, the healer's old notes and the new pages he had filled along his journey. Garlic, barley, cabbage, bone broth, herbs, and many others. Food simple enough for anyone to find. Remedies gentle enough for children. Knowledge powerful enough to protect whole villages. He whispered to himself, they were never magical. They were never secret. They were just simple, and people forgot. He now understood why the healer had hidden the pages so carefully. During the darkest times, fear and power had twisted the truth. The nobles wanted control over grain, over land, over sickness itself. If common people learned how to stay strong with simple foods, they would no longer be weak. They would no longer rely on the wealthy for survival. So the nobles spoke softly against these foods, called them poor man's meals, or dismissed them as superstition. Slowly, quietly, generation by generation, the old knowledge faded. The scribe felt a quiet anger rise in his chest, not loud or blazing, but steady like a coal glowing under ash. People had suffered because of forgotten wisdom. Children had gone hungry. Soldiers had grown weak. Families had feared sickness without knowing the simple tools that once protected them. He picked up a fresh sheet of parchment and began copying every detail from the healer's notes. His hand moved with care, making sure each word was clear and each drawing easy to understand. He wrote about garlic and its power against sickness. He wrote about barley and its slow strength. He wrote about cabbage saving whole villages during brutal winters. He wrote about bone broth keeping the weak alive when nothing else could. Hours passed. Sunlight shifted across the floor. The candles burned low. Still he wrote, page after page, determined that this knowledge would never be buried again. When he finished, he tied the new pages into small bundles with simple string. These were not secrets to be locked away. These were gifts, meant to be shared. He packed them carefully and left the church once more, this time with a purpose stronger than curiosity. His first stop was a nearby village. He handed a bundle to a farmer who had lost much during the last winter. The man opened the pages, his eyes widening as he read about how cabbage had saved villages in the past. He smiled, then laughed softly, as if remembering something he had once heard from his grandfather. The second bundle went to a healer woman who had always felt unsure of her place in the village. When she read the notes on garlic and honey, tears filled her eyes. "My mother taught me this," she whispered. "But I thought people would laugh if I said it aloud." Another bundle went to a cook in a busy town. When she read the part about bone broth, she clapped her hands and said, "I knew it. My grandmother always said broth could keep a man standing even when the world tried to push him down." The scribe traveled far, giving the knowledge to anyone who would read it: farmers, mothers, soldiers, healers, cooks, and even wandering shepherds. Some were surprised. Some were grateful. All of them understood the truth in the simple wisdom. Weeks passed. Slowly, changes began to appear across the kingdom. Fields that had once been empty now grew barley again. Smoke from kitchens carried the scent of soup and broth. Garlic hung from doorways, not as fear, but as protection. Villagers boiled cabbage into warm pots that fed many mouths. Conversations shifted. People shared stories their grandparents had once told them, stories they had nearly forgotten. Children grew stronger. Old men regained energy. Villages survived harsh weather with calm instead of fear. The kingdom began to thrive, not because of magic, not because of coins or kings, but because knowledge had returned to the hands of the people who needed it most. One evening, as the scribe crossed a hill overlooking a busy town, he paused. Lamps glowed in windows. Smoke drifted from chimneys. And from somewhere in the distance, he could smell broth and herbs cooking. He realized something important. Sometimes the greatest power does not come from grand inventions or hidden secrets. It comes from simple things, things that grow quietly in the soil, things that boil in humble pots, things that people share with kindness rather than hide with fear. He smiled and continued walking, his cloak rustling softly in the wind. The journey that had begun with a forgotten paper hidden in a church wall now lived in the hands and hearts of thousands. And the kingdom, once weak and uncertain, began to remember the strength that had always lived in simple foods, simple wisdom, and simple people. The lost knowledge had returned at last. As the scribe continued his travels, the bundles of copied knowledge slowly spread across the kingdom like seeds on the wind. Each village he visited, each family he met, added a new layer to the growing movement. But he knew his work was not yet finished. Knowledge was returning, yes, but he wanted to see with his own eyes whether the kingdom truly understood the lessons hidden in the healer's papers. One late afternoon, he reached a small village he had visited months earlier, before he began his long journey. At that time, the people there had been tired, worried, and fearful of the long winter before them. Now, as he walked through the same dusty street, he saw a different picture. Children chased each other with bright energy. Women hung garlic bundles near their doors with confidence instead of fear. A large pot of broth simmered in the open air, filling the village with the smell of herbs and warmth. And workers in the fields spoke cheerfully as they harvested cabbage rows that stretched in neat lines as far as his eyes could see. The scribe stood for a moment, simply watching. Life here was brighter. And he could feel, deep inside, that he had played a part in this change. He approached an elderly farmer, who recognized him immediately. "You returned," the farmer said, smiling. "Look around you. Your knowledge helped us." The scribe asked gently, "What changed?" "Everything," the man replied. "When we saw how simple foods made us stronger, we stopped waiting for miracles. We stopped waiting for rich men to save us. We saved ourselves." He pointed to a group of women mixing chopped cabbage into a large pot. "Cabbage kept our families full when the cold came early. Garlic stopped the coughing sickness before it spread. And broth, the broth kept our elders strong even when the nights were freezing." He clapped the scribe on the shoulder with surprising strength for his age. "Simple things," the farmer said proudly. "We had them all along. We just forgot their power." The scribe walked through the village slowly, taking in every detail. He saw a mother giving her small child a spoonful of warm broth, whispering old recipes she had learned from the papers. A young soldier rubbed garlic onto a cut on his arm, nodding when the scribe passed as if to say, "I know the truth now." A group of men loaded sacks of barley onto a cart, laughing about how the grain now kept them working from sunrise to sunset. Everywhere he looked, he saw pieces of the healer's lost knowledge brought back to life. But there was one person the scribe wanted to speak with before his journey ended, the old healer's granddaughter in the garlic village. She had been one of the first to trust him, one of the first to share her family's hidden notes. He traveled to her village over the next few days and found her tending a small herb garden behind her home. She looked up when she heard him, and her eyes lit with recognition. "You've returned," she said, wiping soil from her hands. "Tell me, did the kingdom listen?" The scribe sat beside her on a low stone wall and nodded. "Yes. More than I expected." The woman smiled. "My mother would have been glad to hear that." He told her the stories he had seen, villages thriving again, children growing stronger, people no longer ashamed of using simple remedies. He told her about the farmer who now feared no winter, the cooks who revived old recipes, and the soldiers who carried garlic not as superstition but as protection. When he finished, the woman placed a new bulb of garlic into his hand. "Then your journey was worth it," she said softly. "Healing knowledge belongs to everyone, not only to those in power. And simple things deserve respect." The scribe looked at the garlic in his hand, feeling its weight, not heavy, but meaningful. This bulb represented more than food. It represented freedom, survival, and the ability of ordinary people to care for themselves and each other. He thanked the woman and walked toward the village edge, where he sat under the shade of a tree. He opened his bag and looked at the healer's original papers, the fragile, nearly forgotten notes that had started everything. They were safe now. Their secrets were no longer secret. Their wisdom was no longer buried. As the sun slowly sank behind the hills, painting the sky with soft orange and purple light, he thought about everything he had learned. The healer had never intended to create magic. He had simply observed the quiet strength hidden in everyday foods. He had understood that garlic chased sickness, that barley fueled the hard-working, that cabbage kept families alive through freezing nights, and that broth carried warmth to weak bodies. None of it was extraordinary. Yet all of it was powerful. The scribe realized the greatest lesson of all. It is never the grand or expensive things that protect a kingdom. It is often the small, humble things, the ones people overlook or take for granted. Strength does not always come from power. Sometimes it comes from cabbage in a pot. From barley in a field. From garlic hung above a door. From bones boiling into broth in a simple kitchen. As stars appeared in the sky, the scribe closed the healer's papers gently and placed them back into his bag. His journey had come full circle. He did not need to travel anymore. Others would continue the work now, farmers, healers, mothers, cooks, soldiers, and anyone who believed in the quiet power of simple things. He stood, brushing dust from his cloak, and looked out at the darkening horizon. Villages twinkled with small lights in the distance. He imagined families gathering around warm pots, sharing meals made from old wisdom, building strength with every bite. And he knew the kingdom would remain strong as long as people remembered this truth. Even in the hardest times, hope can grow from the simplest seed. The scribe walked into the night, not as a seeker of forgotten knowledge but as someone who had restored it, quietly, faithfully, and for everyone. The healer's wisdom had returned. And this time, it would not be lost.